Hi, everyone. It's Andrew Walsh, author of Lost Dayton, Ohio, and founder and writer at DaytonVistas.com. So, one aspect of my research is tracing Dayton's legacy as an industrial power. Dayton has a rich history of innovation, and some have even called it the Silicon Valley of the early 20th century because Dayton had the most patents per capita of any U.S. city at that time. Dayton was also called the City of a Thousand Factories. And when you think about the most influential of those factories, this is usually the one that comes up. So this aerial is of National Cash Register, or NCR, during its heyday, the company most closely associated with Dayton. NCR was much more than just a place to work over the years, it was a vital piece of the Dayton community. And here's an aerial of that same NCR factory location around when they left Dayton for good in 2009. So the demolition of these NCR buildings had started back in the 1970s, and the company's complete departure after calling Dayton home for almost 150 years was a crushing blow for a city that had already been suffering. None of the buildings built during founder John H. Patterson's lifetime survive today. But in my research, I don't just focus on lost, as in totally demolished and gone. For me, it also means things that are still here, but transformed and largely forgotten by many people. So I hope my work allows people to find these remaining parts of Dayton and also learn a bit more about what they once were. So with that in mind, let's look at another prominent Dayton company with a similar type of aerial. Now, this one is Delco, started by NCR employees Edward Deeds and Charles Kettering. Kettering invented the electric starter for the automobile, and he and Deeds turned it into a massive company with thousands of workers and multiple factory buildings. This image is from around 1940. You can see Delco also occupied entire blocks, both factory buildings built for them as well as repurposed older buildings. And it was interesting to compare the fate of Delco and NCR, not as local places of employment, because both are long gone in that sense, but rather the fate of the buildings they once occupied. So on the NCR side, we saw the demolition, which was so demoralizing. But in contrast, Delco is more positive, as its most important manufacturing buildings survive and have been converted into new uses. So in this image, you can see Delco's two most important manufacturing buildings, which I have circled. Delco's plant number one is the smaller building, kind of in the upper left of the two. That was abandoned in the 1980s, but was recently redeveloped and converted to apartments. And the much larger building is Delco plant number two, which was later Mendelssohn's liquidation outlet and is currently in the process of a massive mixed use redevelopment that will include apartments, offices, and retail uses. The large plant number three of Delco is gone, but that's now the location of the Dayton Dragons ballpark, which I'd say is a fair enough trade. It's also interesting to use one of my favorite research tools, the Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps, to explore some of the then and now of Delco as well. So you can really lose yourself in some of these detailed maps, and they give some extremely interesting details about the companies. Now, both NCR and Delco actually got started in much more humble conditions than these large corporate campuses that we've looked at. So, NCR was established when local coal dealer John H. Patterson got interested in the cash register that had recently been invented by James Ritty. He took over primary ownership of the business, which was previously known as James Ritty's New Cash Register and Indicator, and renamed it the National Cash Register Company. So his new firm was originally located downtown in the Callahan Power Building, which was built in the late 1870s on Main Street just north of 3rd. The lines in this image indicate how much space in the building was occupied by NCR at the different years. You can see it was expanding significantly, and by 1888, the company employed 220 people and looked beyond the crowded downtown to land south of town where it could grow into a juggernaut with 20,000 workers. And Patterson would revolutionize everything from factory design and marketing to employee welfare, community relations, and much more. As for Delco, Kettering, Deeds, and other friends first tinkered in the Deeds barn, which was located at 319 Central Ave. But when they got an order for 12,000 electric starters in 1911, they didn't have close to the capacity to produce them, nor anyone to outsource to. Deeds and Kettering had considered themselves more research and development type of guys, but they realized they'd have to acquire some factory space of their own. And Delco's first manufacturing space was built in the Beaver Power Building, which had just been constructed in 1910 at the corner of St. Clair and 4th Street. It was actually a later version of the same type of industrial loft that the Callahan Power Building was, which we just saw NCR started in. So from there, Delco moved its equipment from Deed's barn, and that was where they cranked out their first starters. But then they almost immediately needed to move to a bigger space, which was that plant number 1 that we saw next to the ballpark today. So NCR's Callahan Power Building is long gone, but this Beaver Power Building is actually still here too. It was abandoned near the end of the 20th century, but it was refurbished and converted to the St. Clair Lofts in 2001, one of the first apartment conversions downtown. And I think all of this is important because large industrial buildings aren't usually as immediately impressive from the street as things like historic mansions or even ornate commercial blocks. They don't usually get put on historic landmark registries quite as often, even though their contributions to our collective history are perhaps even more important. So as a result, they often either get demolished with little pushback or are adapted to new uses with not so much understanding from the public of their original functions. And for decades with Delco, no historic markers denoted their original purposes, but today the new developments hammer home the Delco name. And the Deeds barn actually survives too. First, a replica had been built in Carillon Park in 1949, pictured here, but the original barn was actually moved to the same park in 2009, where it currently resides inside and features a variety of exhibits. And finally, if we return to NCR, its buildings are still gone, of course, but the University of Dayton has led rebuilding efforts on the land that was vacant and desolate in this area. So, located next to the NCR campus and previously a landlocked school, it made a lot of sense for the university to acquire former NCR land. So, UD purchased a 50-acre parcel from NCR in 2005 for $25 million and later bought additional acreage nearby, including NCR's former world headquarters, which is now home of the UD Research Institute. But the past industrial use made this land challenging to rebuild on. So that 2005 parcel was considered a brownfield site where building foundations and debris were buried, which required significant environmental mediation. So UD was awarded millions in environmental cleanup grants to help with these efforts. Contractors excavated soil from Brown Street to South Patterson Boulevard, removing asphalt, asbestos, volatile organic compounds, and all types of other debris. And then post cleanup, the university brought in things like the $51 million GE Aviation Epicenter, the $35 million Emerson Helix Innovation Center, and most recently, the $45 million Roger Glass Center for the Arts, which recently opened at the southeast corner of Main and Stewart. So, in addition to NCR and Delco's many innovations and accomplishments that are well known, I see Delco as a good example of historically significant buildings being given a new chance at life. And even the NCR land can be thought of as an inspiring reuse despite all the losses there. I've been encouraged to find that Dayton's famous entrepreneurial spirit is still alive and well, and many great people are hard at work on creative solutions for our city. So that's it for today. Be sure to subscribe to see my new videos and check out DaytonVistas.com to read more of my writing, including a lot more about NCR and Delco. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.